Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious with Martin McClellan here. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. How you doing, Mark?
Well, we're glad to see you here in our museum. Martin is now with Vaya Space, our local hometown rocket company. We're gonna talk about that at a future date with Martin. But he was a contamination engineer on the Hubble telescope over 30 years ago. And a contamination engineer basically does what?
Make sure that you don't get excessive particles and or molecular contamination on surfaces.
Or, as layman terms, you don't take a bunch of dirt to space with you and human grease and stuff like that in space.
Yeah.
So
one that I always like to do is you take your thumb and you go put it down on the surface, and a juicy one of those spread evenly across the primary mirror would have violated the vacuum ultraviolet requirement of the contract over a 15-year lifetime.
Wow. Well, we're going to talk about his experience with the Hubble Space Telescope that was, of course, launched in 1990, and for 31 years has been orbiting Earth well beyond its life expectancy and giving us a whole new idea of this universe that we live in. And it's a lot because of scientists like Martin McClellan here who made sure that there weren't any germs, any oils, anything that would degrade this science. And he's going to get some technical thing about this science because it's not just follicles of hair and things like that that you're thinking of. It's more than that, molecules of contaminant that could prohibit an instrument from reaching its maximum levels for UV sensitivity and things like that. But we wanted to let you know we're so glad that you're with us today. These oral histories, this one with Martin McClellan, is made possible by the Marie Louise G Endowment that we're so grateful for, and was given specifically to us, Martin, to do more oral histories with space workers like yourselves, because here at the American Space Museum, we consider you a national treasure in every sense of the word. Now a real gem of our national treasures is Marty Wink there, my cameraman and producer behind the scenes there, who worked on the lunar module for Grumman in the 1960s, and then he had a 30-year career with the shuttle engines on the Space Launch System. So Marty's here. We also got Jessica Galloway, our Trekkie techie, who is taking us to great new levels. And I was talking to some of you followers out there, like Tom Usiak. Hi, Tom. Tom said that our audio's gotten better, the video's good, and he just loves these graphics that Jessica Galloway's brought in to our Stay Curious program here to stay. So we're very grateful for that, and we hope that
we're preserving for the next generation.
That's right. We're preserving for the next generation this oral history, and we hope you're watching it on Facebook Live or YouTube or Twitch. We know you're watching it there, so tell your friends too. And we just hit 1,000 followers on YouTube, and that is so important to monetize our nonprofit in the social media world. And we're very blessed that you all are catching on because, Martin, we think we've got content that other people don't have. We're a very humble museum, but bringing you in here with your expertise of Hubble and other things that you're going to talk about down the road with Vaya Space, one of the important small companies that is making rockets out of 3D printers. This is what we're all about. You've been in our museum a couple times. What do you think of our little museum?
It's very interesting, and when I walk by, I get a little bit homesick, so to speak, because I walk by the consoles that you've got out there for the firing room.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first 10 years when I was at Kennedy Space Center, I was, again, a contamination control engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But for the last 14 years I was out there, I was a test project engineer. And that's the person in the firing room that would power up the vehicle and power down the vehicle for power on testing and that. So I had that experience.
A TPE, to throw an acronym on you. We've had
another acronym, TPE, Test Project
Baker's
Engineer.
Eric Baker's a TPE. And,
yes.
You know Eric?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
He gave me one of my biggest projects, as a matter of fact. Well,
Eric's a good friend of our museum. Hope he's watching from time to time. We need to, we've had him on Stay Curious, but it was the old school days, Marty. We'll have to have him back here. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about yourself, Martin. Where'd you grow up and how'd you get interested in science?
Born in California, grew up though in Connecticut, and always interested in astronomy. Was interested in maybe being an astronaut when I was 10, 11 years old.
Me too, underneath the bottom bunk of the bunk bed, playing with the springs,
There you
thinking
go.
I was in space.
But got interested in that. Did get, I was the student assistant for the astronomy professor where I got my bachelor's degree
Okay.
at Western Connecticut State University. But it didn't quite work out for astronaut, but I got awful close because I worked with the Shuttle program and I worked on Hubble. I've always been kind of leading edge aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
And that leading edge aerospace, right out of college, my first job was the Hubble Space Telescope. And how that happened was kind of interesting. When I was doing my bachelor's degree in mathematics, I had one child, and the only way I could really get through college is I had to work nights. Well, the best job to work nights was security guard
Okay. Yeah.
because you had to walk around once an hour for about 15 minutes and do your rounds, but the other 45 minutes, you get to do your homework. So that led me to the point where there was a gentleman, director of quality engineering, that had a position, and I had submitted my information to one of the other people that I'd known when I was a security guard.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes in and says, I want to put a quality person in your organization. He says, here. And he handed him my resume and my application. And the guy looked at it and said, wait a minute, was this guy a security guard down at Ridgefield? He goes, yeah. He says, always used to carry a lot of math books around? Yeah. He says, nuts about astronomy? He goes, yeah, that's him. Where is he? I've been looking for him for a year.
All right. That's interesting.
And so never burn your bridges regardless of what type of job you're doing. You may think security guard wasn't very important, but it got me known by the right people at the right time.
Well, then, yes, we're reminded by lots of our visitors here. Randall Clay's one, that a young engineer that we had in here. We're not so young engineer, but be ready when that opportunity arises.
Yeah.
And when it does, don't bemoan the fact that you're not getting the break. Be ready when that break happens. And
Exactly.
and so from security guard to
Contamination control.
contamination control. Well, tell our Stay Curious, our wonderful Stay Curious viewers out there, why contamination of spacecraft is a big deal. Why we shouldn't have that.
Especially for like a telescope, if you don't build it in a clean room, then you're going to have all sorts of debris. Like you said, hair, skin flakes, and all that on that surface because it takes years, literally years, to build these large optical systems.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Webb telescope.
12 years has been in construction.
It's been in construction for 12 years, and they have to do everything they can to keep those mirrors clean because there's even just the hydrocarbon from it. And right there, we're polishing the mirror. And once you coat it, you can't let anything more fall onto it unless you have some way of cleaning it. And those coatings, once you coat it and it's nice and shiny, you don't have too many things that can touch that surface, like you see there in the picture, without scratching it, and that would be very bad news.
And you're not talking about the dust that settles on your dresser that you once a week, have to clean up. You're talking about microscopic things. You're talking about
Absolutely.
things on the atomic level, correct?
Yes. Well, not atomic, but on the micron level.
Micron level, okay.
So it might be 5 microns or 10 microns, and if you have enough of those particles,
define a micron for us.
1/millionth of a meter.
1/millionth of a meter. Okay.
You have a centimeter, then you have a millimeter, and then micron is 1/millionth of a meter.
Oh, well, that is a small particle. All right.
Lots of zeros.
On there.
Lots of zeros there.
we're looking at the Hubble Space Telescope there. How big is it? How many feet across is that Hubble?
I remember it being 84 inches in diameter.
Mm-hmm. About 7
So,
feet,
About
7.5
feet,
feet.
7.5 feet.
And it's one mirror. And what they're using with the Webb telescope, and we'll talk about that towards the end, Martin.
Yeah, not a problem.
Is I think there's 18 segments for the Hubble. I mean the
For
Webb,
the-
and
yeah.
it's 17 feet across. So
Right.
and just I'm an amateur astronomer. You're an amateur astronomer. Explain light gathering power. Why a bigger mirror is better.
Well, two things. A bigger mirror is better because you get better resolution. So you can actually see things as, like if you're looking at the planets and that, you'll see more detail. Or if you're looking at a moon or an asteroid and it's dim enough for the Hubble to look at it, then you get more resolution on it. And also, it sees dimmer and dimmer images. It collects more light with the bigger that it gets.
And it's the physics of light that allows this, and a tremendous discovery. This is not unlike the telescope that Newton invented in the 1640s. Galileo popularized the lens telescope that has a lens at the end like one binocular, and then there are hybrid telescopes that are lens and mirror.
Yeah.
All right. But the Hubble is strictly a reflecting telescope. In its light path are all kinds of instruments that have been swapped out over the 30 years
Right.
By the telescope.
Right.
And Jessica's got a note there, like in.
Backyard astronomy.
Oh,
Like
right.
that, yeah.
Yes, the quality gets better the bigger it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Your pictures get better the bigger your mirror
Exactly.
is.
Yeah, that's why you want the biggest telescope you can afford, but also you have problems with maneuvering a telescope. So if you're gonna be portable, it's got to fit in your car, your vehicle, wherever.
Right.
That's a consideration. And with the Hubble telescope, one of the considerations was it being deployed out of the bay,
Space shuttle.
the space shuttle.
Right. Can we fit it?
Yeah,
And it just barely fit.
just barely fit.
Because it was like the wide portion, the spacecraft portion of the Hubble Space Telescope was 13.5 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
And the bay is 15
feet.
15 feet in diameter. So you had like 1.5 foot clearance on each all around.
Mm-hmm.
And when it closed the doors. So that's not a lot. And then where it had to click in what they called the keel latch,
Mm-hmm.
there was a certain part of the telescope that it had to fit there. And they thought 1 foot clearance up front,
Mm-hmm.
but they had forgot to include one of the dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't include the dimension for the door. Fortunately, the width of the door was only 4 inches, so they only
The
had
door that closes on the front.
on the front of
barn
the Hubble.
door
That,
there.
yeah, that
They
keeps
didn't
it
include
dark.
that.
They didn't include that in the.
Yeah, it'll totally fit.
That's
It'll
that's
fit.
4 inches. That's kind
That's
of
4 inches.
That's thicker than I thought it was. I never saw
Yeah.
the dimensions.
Well,
of
the
that.
whole dimension from the front of the telescope, which is where they had done it before, to the front of the door was 4 inches.
Uh-huh.
And so they only had 8 inches clearance up front, but it was enough. They didn't need any more, fortunately.
Marty, who put together the lunar module, I'm sure is not a stranger to some things happen to be squeezed in a tight spot or using some good old muscle grease to get it in there.
Yeah.
Well, as a person involved, you were the engineer in charge of making sure that there weren't germs, there weren't dust, there weren't microscopic things involved on the Hubble.
You get, if you laid out what we call, and we had what we called a witness plate. So it was just aluminum. It was just a square of aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd put it up in the clean room. And once a month, we'd go wash it off. And we would do, with that rinse, we would filter that and get all the particles that were on it so that we'd known how much had fallen out during the month. Now they've got machines that'll do that for you. If you put out their witness plate that's meant for their machine.
Called a witness plate. The
Yeah,
witness, they contamination is happening. In
So you put that out there, and they have machines now that'll just go read it for you.
Huh.
And in some cases, you can even find out what the material is that's falling out. But there's also hydrocarbons, that what we call non-volatile residue, that'll fall out over a period of time.
Even though you're in what is, quote, a clean room.
Right. You
It
still get that, and
you have to bring fresh air in there and have
it's filtered fresh air. But if you open too big of a door, you have positive pressure in the clean room. And when the doors are closed, that works. The little gaps that are down at the bottom of a door, you'd feel air coming out if you put your hand down there. But if you open that personnel door on a huge class 100,000 clean room, there's a delta pressure monitor right there at the door to let you know that it's positive pressure. You open that door, you look at that monitor, and it goes to 0. But you've got all these filters and all these. Yep. It's not very easy to keep a large positive pressure on a large room.
Not easy to keep a clean room clean.
Nope.
Well, we're talking to Martin McClellan. He's an aerospace engineer that worked on the Hubble telescope, making sure it wasn't contaminated with earthly items that could, one, mess up the optical system and the instruments, but two, any biomedical things you don't want to
on that, we didn't care about germs so much, but for germs to be there would be your hydrocarbons and things like that would be food for them and that type of thing, and you definitely wouldn't want that. And you don't want skin flakes and that type of stuff, and you try to control that with the clean room garments and that everybody was done. Now, the primary mirror was stored and built in a class 10,000 clean room.
You mentioned a class 1,000. Now this is class 10,000, which
class
is
10,000,
10 times more clean, probably, huh?
I think.
Yeah, it's 100,000 was the big room. The primary mirror was kept in a class 10,000.
Triple T said the white room was a class 100.
For the fine guidance system. The fine guidance system was built in a class 100 clean room.
So it's all scalable.
Yes.
All
But that class 100 also had a limit as to the number of people you could have in there at one time. So you might get 8 people in the fine guidance clean room, and it would be the size of this room that you're in right now.
So part of contamination control is controlling the number of people inside.
Yes.
And per square footage type of thing. So
Right.
Literally, here we have, of course, point out why the technicians are dressed the way they are, Martin.
That is what we call a clean room bunny suit. It's called a bunny suit. And the ones that you see in a full mask where it drops down into, they're not just the face mask, but a full mask. They're wearing that because they have a beard.
Okay.
So they have to cover all that hair to keep it, if it does drop off, to keep it inside the clothing, and then it'll only come out once they disrobe from the clean room suit, from the bunny suit.
Marty thinks this is the picture you're in.
We're trying to figure out what picture you're in
there.
He's
there's
teasing us, Martin.
I've teased them and told them that they have to find the one that I'm in, and I have to say, nope, I'm not there.
They're not there.
I don't think this is the one.
Well, we're talking with Martin McClellan. He is has been involved 30 years ago, 3 decades ago. You were involved with the Hubble telescope and other spacecraft. The biomedical germ is a lot more because we don't want to pollute other asteroids, Mars, and so forth. Were you involved with any of those missions or an advisor?
No, not so much, but I understand what you're saying with that. Definitely Hubble I didn't have to worry about because it was just going to be in orbit, and we don't worry about contaminating in orbit. Plus, on top of that, germs won't live too long. Viruses might, but germs won't live too long. So there's that. Now, that one is an interesting one. That's the
This picture
beginning,
here.
right? That picture right there that you see now is of the metering truss, and it's got some test structure around it down towards the bottom there. But also, the metering truss is held the secondary mirror. So that's a mirror that reflects from the primary mirror into the instruments.
Mhm.
And it is the Hubble Space Telescope was essentially a Ritchie-Cretan style telescope.
Okay. Those astronomers out there, Ritchie-Cretan is the name of the it's a different configuration of a reflecting telescope.
Yes.
To maximize the secondary mirror's obstruction isn't as much in those, I think, as,
Yes,
as a
correct,
regular
yeah.
Newtonian telescope. Are you in that picture? That's the one I'm going to guess. You have your back
It's the
to
one
us
we
there.
saved today, so I know
Yeah.
he's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why she knows.
Surprise.
That's
And,
why she knows, and it's like, no.
And then of course this is the inside of the telescope. They put a covering
Yes.
around it there.
Right.
One thing also, just not the telescope, but all the equipment and tools have to be
Yes.
specially.
Yes.
And I've read, Martin, where you 3 decades ago, this was tell us a little bit about how cutting edge technology was that this is.
What
Today,
this-
30 years later,
Yeah.
these are great careers. It's taken on a whole new
Yeah.
level where they're thinking about it when they're manufacturing the metal pieces. So,
Yeah.
So tell us about
Well, when
the tool.
when I came in the first week, they threw me in at the deep end,
Mm-hmm.
and he turned around and he said, "You're going to do a contamination control class to all these technicians." And fortunately, there was a whole bunch of technicians, but thankfully, there was one engineer. And the engineer sat in the back corner. And I said, "This is the most sensitive telescope that has ever been built." And they said, "We've already done this before," because they happened to be the ones that built Copernicus, which was a 27-inch telescope
Right.
that was put into orbit. And I said, "No, you haven't." "Yes, we have. It's the same." And I said, "Well, since if I remember correctly, resolution is a cubic. So this is 3 times larger. So this is 27 times more sensitive than you've ever done before." And all the technicians' heads swiveled to the back right corner of the room.
Mm-hmm.
To the engineer.
To the engineer. And the engineer looked at me, and then he looked at them and went,
Uh-huh.
"Yep." So I was able to, and at that point, from then on out, it actually formed a good bond with the techs, and I was able to get them to do a lot of the things that needed to be done
Mhm.
for keeping the contamination off the Hubble Space Telescope.
And in its 30-year history there, you had very few problems. Of course, the telescope was orbited with bad optics, not that bad, but they had to send up a correcting.
those
forward.
bad optics was because the outer edge was ground 2 microns, just 2 microns too flat.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put CoStar in 1993,
Mm-hmm.
and it had the opposite, and it corrected all the instruments. And then when you made a new instrument for Hubble, you simply corrected the vision inside the instrument itself.
You gave it a contact lens.
Yes.
What are we looking at here with the technicians there?
That is the integration of the metering truss.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to move out.
I can move you.
Okay. And a little farther.
'Cause
There you
that's
go.
Is that you?
Yep.
That's you.
That's you over there and there. All right, okay.
there.
With the glasses.
Okay.
See, you would have hit it.
There you go. There you are.
I would have hit it.
Far left at the bottom beside Martin is
You're
Martin
gonna
there.
point right to yourself.
Yep. It's just whoops. Yep.
That way.
Well,
that
that's
way.
cool. That's a different bunny suit, the peach suit there.
Right, and that's why I do have the book that is the space telescope. I got that,
Uh-huh.
and that's why I didn't flash that particular page, because if you'll notice, the plastic covering portions of the metering truss are what color?
Green.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
That's good.
we loaded up the picture.
We're showing that book there a second there where you had it up there. And let me ask you, you're involved with this. Tell us about the pride you have in being involved in what is undoubtedly one of the amazing scientific machines ever created by man.
It was just something. It's, as I said, it's happened my whole career,
Yes.
and I've been on leading edge, and it's just opportunity. Whoops,
Yeah.
I had an extra in there.
There we go. Showing you inside just showing you inside this beautiful book there. There's another picture Martin had there. Yeah, continue there. I was just trying to get your esoteric thoughts
So,
of being involved with this. I mean,
This it to me, it was absolutely amazing, and it was just a gift happening to be in a place where the company was building the Hubble Space Telescope, because that was Danbury, Connecticut.
mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks of NASA and they think of Kennedy Space Center and Johnson Space Center, and
So it was built in Danbury, Connecticut
yes,
at Perkins-Elmer.
Perkin-Elmer built
Okay.
the optical telescope assembly, but Perkin-Elmer didn't build spacecraft.
Right.
So we had to ship the optical telescope assembly out to Lockheed Martin in California. And they flew it on a plane called the SuperGuppy.
Mm-hmm.
And so they flew it across country in the SuperGuppy. And that's a plane that's very interesting because it doesn't like to land.
Especially with a big old telescope.
Really?
on it.
Yeah. It wants to just keep flying. So the pilots often describe it. He says, well, really what we do is we fly it into the ground
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Us
and then
tiny-
slow
Yeah.
it down.
us
To
tiny-
try and slow it down.
Yep.
It's
Well,
what are they called? Like crashing with
Yes. Controlled crash.
controlled crash.
Right.
Yeah.
Controlled crash.
like jet fighters do on aircraft carriers
Yeah. So
in there.
if you want to move on the photos to there you go.
And now we're looking, and there's a person. There's Martin on the right there, a drawing of him and the Hubble telescope to give you
That's to scale.
a size there. Once again, we're talking Martin McClellan, who's an aerospace engineer today with a local company called Vaya Space, and he worked on the Hubble telescope as a contamination engineer. And oral histories like these are made possible by the Marie Louise G Endowment that we're so grateful for, Martin. And we're hoping to bring in more of your space worker friends. Next
Yep.
week, we're going to have 2 Vaya Space engineers here.
Good.
And Vaya Space chairman of the board is astronaut Sid Gutierrez.
Yes.
And we can't wait to meet Sid and have him on Stay Curious. Understand
Yep.
he's a very likable fellow.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And tell us, while I'm talking about Vaya, what is your job at Vaya right now?
Right now I'm strategic supply chain.
Strategic
Supply chain analyst. So
All right.
it's bringing in the vendors and that do work for the company
Okay.
and making sure that they have the capabilities and can be precise as they need to
Okay.
be.
And Rob Fabian's your president, and
Yep.
his Uncle John was an astronaut.
Yep.
And we're going to bring these folks on board. In fact, our Hubble Telescope Gallery is going to be the Vaya Space Gallery soon.
Yep.
So what a neat little transition and serendipity, getting to know you and
Yep.
then being involved with Vaya there. But here's one of the greatest instruments mankind's ever built. Tell us a little bit about what.
Okay.
we're
As you
looking
see
at
there on the top, towards the back, you have the axial scientific instruments, which would be like your wide field planetary cameras and instruments like that. CoStar was actually put into there. And then you have the fine guidance system and it's a little. It looks smaller. You have big oblong ones, and then you have the little semicircles there. The little
To direct and
semicircles
point the telescope.
that points the telescope and does a fine guidance on it, and the main ring, which encloses the primary mirror and gets to the rest of the structure, and the metering truss. It attaches the main ring attaches the primary mirror to the metering truss, so everything can work from there. And there was a lot of electronic boxes. That one was an interesting little one that was, for me, I had been with the company and working on Hubble for all of about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to call out one day and said I'd be late, that I'd be about 10 a.m. because my car was malfunctioning. And I got there about 10 after 10.
Mm-hmm.
And my director, standing up at the top of the hallway, looked at me and said, "Go home." I said, "I called in." He said, "No, go home." "What for?" He says, "You're packing." "Why?" He says, "You're going down to Huntsville." "Why am I going down to Huntsville?" "Because you're the expert."
Okay.
God.
And so I went home and packed, and my wife and I had a good laugh. I'm going down because I'm the expert. Sure.
Okay.
I got down there, and what they were doing is thermal vacuum baking cables out, because the materials had to be thermal vacuum baked so that they wouldn't contaminate the optics when they first go up. So they had to be made space ready ahead of time. And they had detection devices and that. And this one set of cables, the bake out was supposed to take 24 hours. And this one set of cables had been in there for 36 hours already. And I didn't know why. I soon found out why. One of the guys there knew a lot about liquid oxygen compatibility. And he was saying, these cables, they've got to be reworked because they aren't liquid oxygen. They aren't compatible with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, these don't. If these cables see liquid oxygen, it's already been a very, very bad day, because those cables were on the Hubble Space Telescope. And though it's going up on the shuttle, you'd have had to have the external tank breach to get locks there. And
Wow.
if the external tank had breached, you're already in big trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So I reset him up in his cleaning method, and the next set went in, and we're done in 12 hours. So when I got there, I actually had a good cry, because when they said I was the expert, they were right.
Cool. And your wife said you're right. And by the way, take the trash out on the way to the
Yeah,
airplane.
but-
Right?
yeah,
She was
exactly.
impressed with that in there. Let's go to the next slide there, showing the telescope in orbit. By the way, it's 450 miles above the Earth. It's going 17,500 miles an hour. And how can you take a picture, Martin, when you're going that fast?
Well, you just keep it fixed on that, which is why the fine guidance system is triple redundant, number one,
Uh-huh.
because you want it to make sure you stay within just
So
a
the
little bit.
telescope's actually locked on and following objects there, like
Exactly.
that arrow showing there,
Right.
coming around there. So,
Make a point of
And there are,
so
you have your solar arrays in that you want it to get the sun, but you always want the sun coming to those solar arrays. You notice they say solar arrays. Notice how it's from the backside.
yes,
There is a 25-degree zone of avoidance. In other words, the Hubble Space Telescope can't point any closer to the sun than 25 degrees away from the sun.
yep,
And then the moon, I believe, is 15 degrees.
yeah, because they're too bright for
They're
the
too
optical
bright
system.
for the optical
They would
system.
fry
They would-
the instruments.
They would fry the instruments.
We were
if they were
talking
doing that.
today about the Hubble telescope looking at objects on the moon, and it doesn't. If it could, it probably would maybe be able to see the rovers. I don't know if the
Yeah,
resolution would be that good.
probably would.
But the instruments are so sensitive that moonlight 200,000 miles away, and the sun, of course, 93 million miles away, are too bright.
Yes.
And they got fail-safe methods to do that
Yeah.
on there. And so in this 30 years of this, I mean, why has it lasted so long? Is it because of the good work of people like you?
Well, and the way that the design is overlooked and what they're looking at, NASA says, yea, verily, and people, as you said, they tend to have a certain pride in what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
with that. So I've always noticed they've said this will last 90 days, and it goes for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this was supposed to go 40 days. This was supposed to go 15 years, and now it's 30.
Yeah. Seems like things that NASA builds as contractors, they either break down right away, or they last 10 times beyond the we've had the
Right.
rovers on Mars and so forth. Give it in there. We were talking about that the mirror was ground in Danbury, Connecticut at
Right.
Perkins Elmer. Then Lockheed Martin in California put the
Spacecraft
the
portion.
spacecraft together.
Right.
But where's it managed?
That's out of Johns Hopkins, this Hubble Space Telescope Science Institute.
In Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes.
Yes. So our whole country's involved with this project.
Absolutely.
Why did Johns Hopkins get it? Because of the scientists,
It's a science program that was there.
the
Yeah.
science program that was there. And so there it is in space there. And we don't know how long it's going to last.
Right.
The
And one of
main-
the things I just saw right
Uh-huh.
up towards the top,
Mhm. The
you
antenna.
have the reaction wheels. So you can't have your reaction control jets like you have on the space shuttle, because if you did, that could contaminate the optics.
The particles
Would
going out of the which is
disperse, and they could
hydrazine
get
or
in.
something like that.
Right. And it could go in.
So they
Yeah.
move it with a gyroscope wheel
Right.
that the set that the
That
spin
spins
of
in
it
a
and how
certain
they
way,
do it
and that's how it
moves it around
slews
in
and
there.
moves it around.
Yep. And in space, the opposite, an equal reaction to
Yep.
what you're putting in there, basic Newtonian physics there. So
Yep.
cool. Let's see what that's that one there. Or I want to go there, and then there's the beautiful telescope being released after one of the service missions from the Hubble.
Yep.
We had 5 service missions after the deploy by STS-31 in 1990.
Right.
109 was the last one 10 years ago. No,
No, it was
11 years.
125.
Yeah, 125. 125.
Which was Atlantis.
2009.
Atlantis.
Yeah,
and
125 was the last.
and I believe, I think you're right, either 2009 or early 2010.
So what's going to happen to it? What is?
Unfortunately, since we've retired the shuttle,
Uh-huh.
what's going to happen to it, unfortunately, is it'll eventually get lower and lower in Earth orbit, and it will eventually enter the atmosphere and burn up.
You think there's a chance that an Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos will take a space tug up there and
Try to retrieve it?
retrieve it? Wouldn't it look beautiful in the
Oh,
Smithsonian?
it would.
Or,
It would be phenomenal
here
for
at Kennedy
somebody
Space Center next to Atlanta.
to design something that could either, one, keep it up there for longer until we could design it, but you'd have to have
Yeah.
a shuttle type of vehicle to bring it back. You
Yeah.
really would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you would also, you might abandon the solar array, no problem, but then you could keep most of the rest of it and bring it back. But you'd have to have a good sized craft.
Well, being tell us, Martin, what the public should know about what this instrument has done for man's concept of the universe.
It has given us, we've been able to see dimmer and dimmer pieces. So all of a sudden we discovered, gee, the universe could be older than we thought it was. It expanded it almost immediately
Mm-hmm.
by about 1 billion years, from like 12.8 billion to 13.8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And then scientists, when they're talking that many numbers, that big of numbers, they usually go, you can say 14.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. But
So-
just exoplanet and
And it's
what-
done a lot of stuff for exoplanet
Dark
detection.
matter and dark energy is the hot topic that it's working on now.
Yep. And it went and it took a picture of an area that of all our ground-based telescopes was devoid. No real stars. It was a star desert. And they didn't think there was anything there. We couldn't see any galaxies or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hubble went and took a picture of the dark area. And all of a sudden, there's hundreds of galaxies.
Not stars, galaxies
Galaxies.
full of stars in this.
Yeah, and
Area
they
of
found
Ursa
some
Major.
stars as well that were very, very dim. But yeah, it was littered with galaxies all over the place. So
And they're just not pretty pictures. These shows scientific investigation, every one of these pictures, with the beauty of it. And I say many times that science fact is stranger than science fiction could ever
absolutely.
be imagined. And the Hubble has proven this over and over with black holes. In fact, one of the new discoveries, they're talking about planets that may have been formed by the debris in the black hole accretion disk.
Yes.
All right. And would
Yeah.
be planets without a sun, and we don't know how that would be, but things like that happening all the time. And it's just amazing. And we're going to launch December 18th, the week before Christmas, at 7:30 in the morning from off the coast of South America, the Webb telescope.
Yeah.
And the Webb telescope is not a 2 or 3 or 5 or 10-fold improvement over the resolution of the Hubble. It's like a 100-fold
Yeah.
improvement. And the way I have given an analogy is, if you're looking through a 50-millimeter lens, through the Hubble, you're going to be looking through a 300-millimeter lens, telephoto lens with the Webb.
And like we said, resolution is a cubic.
And have you dealt with any colleagues that have been involved with contamination things of the Webb? Or?
Not on the Webb. I haven't had contact with anybody working on the Webb telescope, unfortunately. It'll be capable in one way if they've built it really, really, really good, which is why every little tiny thing that's come up, they've delayed it.
Yeah.
They've delayed it. If anything is off, they've delayed it and said, no, we got to go fix that, because it's not going to be in an orbit that we can go change out things.
Mm-hmm.
We have to put the instruments that we want on that, because they're going to put it out at one of the libration points. And I don't remember whether it's L1 or L2.
And that's a point between the
And
Earth
that's
and
a
the
point-
Moon where it stays there. It's not
Correct.
orbiting either one, and the gravity of both is
The
kind
gravity is
of
balanced,
keeping it frozen
and it
in
kind of
one
keeps
area.
there. Now, L1 moves
Uh-huh.
around Earth with the moon, but it's a low energy point, and therefore we'll put it there, and it'll just stay there for 100 years or so.
Called the Lagrange points, and where the Hubble telescope cost about the same as a space shuttle in $1990, about
Yep.
$2 billion.
Yep, and I think it ended from it was probably 2 billion total. The Perkin-Elmer portion of that was 1.2.
Wow. In the Webb telescope, we got $10 billion invested in this Webb telescope, and is right now in the French Guiana. The European Space Agency is going to launch it on an Ariane rocket, and the European Space Agency is involved very highly in
Yes.
the Webb. That's why the Ariane rocket is launching it. Otherwise, they would have had to launch it on the Atlas.
Atlas, yeah.
I don't know
Five.
if Falcon Heavy could have done it or not, but the Falcon Heavy didn't have enough experience to risk this major piece of scientific, the Webb telescope. And as we all know, the Hubble telescope was named after who?
Edwin Hubble.
Edward. And why is he famous?
Oh, he discovered a thing called the Hubble constant, which is the expansion rate of our universe.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to do with that
With,
constant
with the largest telescope at the time, the 200-inch Hale telescope.
Yep.
At Mount Palomar. He also used the 100-inch Hooker a lot.
Yep.
On there. Interesting man, Hubble, that this is named after. He definitely liked being famous. He was friends of Einstein, and they loved hanging out with the silent film star Charlie Chaplin. was one of their best buds, and they loved that Hollywood scene because I read some books about that in there. Now, the Webb telescope is named after,
An administrator, I believe.
yes,
of
James
NASA.
Webb.
James Webb.
Who was Marty's ultimate boss of all the contractors during the Apollo era. Webb was the ultimate PR bureaucrat that got the money we needed to go to the moon, in spite of the Vietnam War money being spent and the money for the civil rights movement. Quite a man, and worthy of this distinction, being made the Webb telescope there. Martin McClellan's been talking with us here on Stay Curious. We enjoyed having you with us, Martin. I wanted to ask you kind of a parting shot here. You're a contamination expert, all right? You're used to being and controlling environments that have no dust, no garbage in them. So in a room like this, does it freak you out? I mean, is there any freak out times for an engineer like you to say, "Oh my God, I am in a sewer pit here"?
Not so much, because I'm used to regular rooms as well. But if you turned around and told me, "Oh, we want you to build this little clean thing," and I'd be going, not without a whole lot of changes, and it's probably going to take you about a year to do it.
Okay, all right. So you see a lot of areas for improvement, for sure. Well, of course, we all live in the same environments and stuff, and I'm just kind of making
Absolutely.
light of the fact that,
Yeah.
compared to your clean rooms, I mean, a regular housekeeper's beautiful
Dining room
probably is like a pigsty to you.
it would be very, very bad. If I had a witness played out in that, a 1 month sample would be way too bad.
Okay.
You
Marty
cannot
Winkle.
come to my house ever.
Okay.
Marty, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, what's the composition of the mirror? It's not everyday.
What's the composition of the Hubble telescope? Very good question.
It was a glass, and as you can see,
Thank
if you go back to the first one, actually, what's dark there is wrapped is like a composite, but it's an open structure. It just is structured for that,
Like a honeycomb.
like a honeycomb, and then it is a glass substrate on the top, and then when they coated it with, it's aluminum. It is aluminum that they coated it with, but they put a magnesium fluoride, MgFL2, a magnesium fluoride coating over it. And that's to keep it resistant to scratching and things like that. Although nobody was allowed to take a cloth and wipe the mirror.
Fibers?
No microfibers, because those microfibers would have scratched.
You know,
Polish. Talk about polishing the mirror. How do you polish it?
This giant machine.
With that machine, and then there are other attachments, yes,
there's
to it. But
to
it
the
comes
right
out.
center, and
It
there's
comes
a hole
out-
in the middle because the
right.
light actually hits the secondary mirror up at the top, and it's shot back through the hole
In the middle to the instruments, into the instrument area.
instruments in there. Call that, and that was
Into
a
the focal
grain called
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Um,
But
So you
yeah,
never touched it.
never touched it.
I'm,
Once
Martin-
it was coating, it came out
yeah.
that way. The polishing was polishing the shape, and as I said, what they discovered was that one of the correctors that was supposed to tell them that you've ground it properly was improperly assembled,
Mm-hmm.
and that gave them 2 microns too flat right out on the edge.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
It'd be like
Mar-
wearing last year's pair of glasses.
Yes.
Martin, I was curious if you could think of any spin-offs that have been directly through your industry, like compressed air, perhaps? Something like that come into our society from your clean rooms?
The clean rooms have made possible instruments, and as a matter of fact, certain facets of it's not quite as stringent. But how do you think they build your cell phones? They don't build that in an industrial environment. They build the boards, and that portions have to be kept fairly clean. Maybe not as stringent as like the
Okay.
fine guidance system,
You're
but
like a
and so and you know, your cell phone now, it's more powerful in terms of computing capability than the computers for the space shuttle were.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was the one that got me is when I was there, they upgraded the shuttle computers.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, what computer did you have? 286s.
Yeah, 286s.
And they go, 286s? And he says, yeah. And they replaced them in 1993. He says, yeah, with a Pentium because we had Pentiums. I went, no, they didn't do that. 486? No, 386.
Really?
Just a little nudge.
Wow.
Just a little nudge. But the thing is it had heritage. They knew totally how it worked and how stable it was.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like total of 5 GPCs.
Right. There were 5 of them. Exactly. And one was always kept freeze dried with the backup there for the shuttle. So
It's like Bruce with all his
Well,
backups.
interesting, tricky stuff going on here for sure. And we've enjoyed our conversation with Martin McClellan here. And we will have him back to talk about his role at Vaya Space. But is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share today on the? And you just weren't involved with the Hubble mirror. You were involved with every system on there had to be
the optical
decontaminated,
telescope assembly.
assembly and on there.
And so it was the secondary mirror. And if we had discovered it soon enough, the secondary mirror might have been able to be changed, because that's a lot cheaper than going and regrinding the whole primary mirror.
Oh, I see. If you discovered the anomaly in the mirror before you launched it, you, instead of correcting the big mirror, you could have done something to the
secondary mirror.
and put the
And
corrective
the
lenses
secondary
on
mirror
it
is
there.
only like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, we love talking telescopes. I do anyway here on Stay Curious. And Martin McClellan, we're so glad that you're with us to share your experience of he didn't have his hands on the Hubble because that would have contaminated.
oh, I would have
He's
been. I would have had to report myself so badly. It wouldn't have been funny.
Maybe on this road.
Right. If I was wearing gloves.
As long as there's
Yes, as long as I was wearing gloves.
Was there something else you wanted to share that I hadn't asked you?
No, I
Yeah.
think we covered most
Good.
of what's there, and yeah, it is really something to realize that you've worked on such an important instrument, and just how blessed you are to be in the right place at the right time.
There you go. And obviously, all your good work and the work of those other engineers has made this last at least twice longer than we thought it would.
Yeah.
And the discoveries being made are just phenomenal. 30 years ago, they didn't have the concepts that they have to even go out and research some of the science they're doing today. So,
And in this time frame, the one thing I will say that just hit me is the fact that we didn't know there were planets orbiting other stars.
no, when Hubble was launched, we hadn't discovered the first planet orbiting another star, and now we know almost every star probably has planets orbiting it. So when you look at the beautiful stars at night, there are a lot more solid bodies orbiting them than there are stars, and it just like blows your mind about what we're going to be finding with the Webb telescope, that we'll be able to see surfaces of nearby stars and distinguish some of the shapes of some of the nearby planets orbiting nearby stars. So Martin, so glad to have
Thank
you
you.
with us, my friend.
Thank you very much for
glad that
inviting
you've,
me.
I found a
appreciate
new
it.
friend here at the American Space Museum, and we will have Martin back about Vaya Space. Tomorrow we're going to have more space history on Stay Curious, update you on what's happening with the crewed launches that are going to be lining up here. October 31st, now they've changed the date for the crewed launch to the space station with the
Okay.
Crew 3. Then Crew 2 will be coming back. So we're going to have a real busy role here at the end. And tomorrow we're going to be revealing our next Galaxy of Giving constellation. So you want to stay tuned for that, because we are actively soliciting your donations to our nonprofit. And for $100 or more, we're going to put your star with your name on it on a new constellation. And we will go over that with you tomorrow there. And I'm sure we may have a Vaya star on there someday on one of our constellations in our Galaxy of Giving. Because we know you guys want to be good partners with us, and we appreciate them taking us along for the ride, and this wonderful conversation with Vaya Space engineer now Martin McClellan, who worked on the Hubble. Please tell your friends to watch this wonderful oral history made possible by the Marie Louise G West Endowment, and If you watch it on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and just put some YouTube Stay Curious on there and let it roll for an hour or so. We need to accumulate about 4,000 hours of time to monetize YouTube. Now that we've reached over 1,060 people, thank you for that. Facebook is going great. We want to reach 10,000 followers on Facebook. We're approaching 9. And Twitch is the outlet that we have for you gamers out there that like it. And so like us, share us, subscribe, follow, but best of all, tell your friends that they can only get this kind of space history and content from the American Space Museum and our Stay Curious program. And tell them to come back tomorrow to bridge the space between us.